Hello, I am your host, Tracy Otsuka. Thank you so much for joining me here for another episode of ADHD for Smartass Women. You know, my purpose is always to show you who you are and then inspire you to be it. In the thousands of ADHD women that I've had the privilege of meeting, I've never met a one that wasn't truly brilliant at something. So, of course, I am just delighted to introduce you today to Breanna Autolitano. Breanna Autolitano is a mom of 9 kids, several of whom are neurodiverse, several bonus kids, and a soon-to-be grandma. Breanna calls herself a mindfulness tour guide. She is certified through Eckhart Tolle, has been trained at UCLA's Mindfulness Awareness Center, and specializes in compassionate communication. She's been studying with the Center for Nonviolent Communication for several years. Breanna, welcome. Did I get all of that right?
You did, Tracy. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. It's a delight to have you here. And as you probably know, we want to talk about all it is that you do, especially with 9 kids. But first, I would really love to know what your diagnosis story is. Like, how did it
Sure.
come about?
It started even before middle school. The teachers had identified that I had ADHD, although back then there wasn't official paperwork or anything. They found that I was very energetic. And now I wonder if some of the symptoms that they noticed were actually crossover with autism. I wasn't diagnosed with autism until near 40, so I was a late diagnosis for autism. And they found I was dyslexic when I started to work at a bank. My math teacher didn't realize that I could explain how to do a problem correctly. And she would always say, "You're just not paying attention." I know as ADHDers, we hear this all the time. You're just not paying attention. You need to slow down to get the answer correct. Well, I started to work at a bank when I about 18, and my boss within the first week went, "You are severely dyslexic." And she taught me how to double check myself and how to work with my brain and I ended up employed there for almost 8 years.
So, usually, when people think of dyslexia, they don't think of numbers,
Mm,
but that's wrong.
right.
And so I'm curious if you struggled with numbers when you were at the bank, or was it more letters, or was it both?
It was both. And because it is such a number focused job, account number, dollar amount, that stuck out the most. And I found that if I'm fairly certain I haven't been diagnosed that I have an audio processing disorder, I found that if
Mhm.
they spoke the numbers, it was more likely that I was going to transpose. And back
Mhm.
then, this was in the early 2000s, everyone had a checkbook, right? So I would just ask them to hand over the checkbook so I could visually see it and write it down. And I had less issues when I was able to do that. Sure.
Did the autism diagnoses come first, or did the ADHD diagnoses come first?
ADHD, as far as teachers knowing I had it and me being aware without official paperwork, was childhood.
Hmm.
Dyslexia, late teens. Autism, audio processing, suspected EDS was towards 40. Yeah.
Okay. So, were you diagnosed with ADHD?
Officially, I have been. We did that at the same time as my autism diagnosis.
Okay, got it.
Hmm.
So, what were the symptoms that led you to, and let's start with ADHD first,
Okay.
that led you to seek out any kind of diagnosis? So, I'm assuming that when you went in to get diagnosed, tell me if I'm wrong, you weren't sure what it was. And you were diagnosed, and that's when you got this, this kind of little checklist of
Yeah.
diagnoses, right?
Epiphanies of going, "Oh my gosh, this makes so much sense now." Yeah. The ADHD I understood was just part of my hyperactivity, right? Like being
Mhm.
driven by a motor, working a lot. I've always been a little bit of a workaholic and a perfectionist. And I didn't understand a lot more other than that about ADHD. I knew I was a little, all over the place, artistic. I love sparkly things. But I didn't really fully understand it until I went in and did the paperwork. And of course, the World Wide Web has been fantastic for those of us that have been dismissed quite often in the medical industry. And I was finding a lot of shared reality when I was watching, shorts or reels or on social media. That really helped me understand.
So, why did you go in initially to even get diagnosed? What was going on?
Well, interestingly enough, one of my sons was displaying fairly heavy symptoms of autism. And I was still completely oblivious that I was autistic. When I left retail sales and sales management, especially as my family was growing, I started a cleaning business. And this was right when COVID happened. Cleaning gave me the opportunity to work around my family's schedule, make my own hours. I experienced a lot of time blindness, so I loved the flexibility. I ended up cleaning in quite a few neurodivergent families' homes, as well as first responders, oddly enough. Some of that was being known in our small community as being trustworthy.
Hmm.
And I was already suspecting my son, so I was starting to research some of the symptoms. And I had a client tell me she changed my life. She looked at me and she said, "You don't know you're autistic, do you?" And I said, "I have ADHD." And she said, "You're also autistic." They experienced autism and ADHD in their family. Dad, brothers, sister, her, and her kiddos. So I'd been working for her for over a year when she finally said that to me. And that was the moment that I went, "Oh, I am." And she went, "You don't like to go into certain types of stores because of the ceiling height. The light type that you mentioned is all the same in the grocery stores that you avoid. The ones that you like use a certain type." So finding that it was some vision stuff, some sound things, some sensitivities. And that was the day my life changed and I started researching going ahead and getting myself diagnosed.
So, we know that I think the statistic is that 60% of those diagnosed with autism have ADHD. And you've talked a lot about symptoms of hypersensitivity, which can also be symptoms of ADHD.
So much
Where do you,
crossover.
yeah, where do you think the autism ends, the ADHD begins?
Some of it is so hard to tell. And then if you add in, I have been diagnosed with PTSD as well, with trauma
Mhm.
in my childhood. So some of these things really overlap. However, my symptoms started before the trauma. So that because of that, I know that there was more going on. I do make some jokes that my ADHD and my autism have an argument. One of those has to do with my cell phone, right? I have to clear my notifications. If I have notifications sitting there, they really bother me. And so I've got to clear them out. And so I relate that to my autism. My ADHD knows myself well enough that if I clear that notification, there's a 99% chance I'm going to forget about it and not go back. And so that's one of my jokes that would answer that question of like, they're having an argument right now. I have to clear the notification and I'm probably going to forget about it. Most of the people closest to me know that if I don't respond to send another message, I think you, in fact, your team messaged me 3 times, but I actually miss them until the third time.
So, do you think it's primarily the hyper focus is even more extreme and this need to create systems and
Mm,
structures versus with ADHD, we need them more than anyone, but we
yeah,
balk at them, right? We
yeah.
reject them versus with autism, you really embrace them and can kind of get so locked in that if you can't work through that system that you're familiar with, it just creates so much anxiety.
Yeah, and I feel like I used to be diagnosed with anxiety. I'm not anymore. And you were pivotal in that. I want to just express gratitude. You helped me love the way my brain works. And I have so much gratitude for you because of that. And I found systems that really work even in my employment. So I like routine and I like change at the same time. So I picture my brain like a computer with quite a few tabs open, let's say 20, and I'm working them all and I'm pivoting between them, right? So I have change in what I'm doing, my ADHD. I need some change, I need some fun, and I need the same. One way I could explain that is cleaning houses. I enjoy doing residential cleans and reoccurring. So it's the same house, the same animals, the same people, and it still changes. So I feel like I've hacked my system a little bit to keep me happy. So I'm doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, sprinkling the joy in, right? And the mindfulness in everything I do.
I have found that the women that I have met that have autism and ADHD can often be incredibly successful
Mm,
because they're not just all free for all, like, right?
right.
Not all spontaneity. There's always, like you said, these two parts of their personality and their traits that are constantly fighting each other that kind of keeps them on the straight and narrow, right? Because they do
Yes.
build systems and structures around all of their many interests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you always felt different than others? So if you go back to your childhood and you go back to elementary school, did you always feel like there was something different about you?
Absolutely. And I was bullied a lot, which helped with that feeling. I always had one or two close friends, but I had a difficulty with lasting friendships. I always thought that was because we moved around a lot and I changed schools a lot. So I think that that contributed to it. However, I was bullied pretty heavily. My last name is Autolitano. They called me Auto R word. I don't want to say it all the way,
Oh,
So, yeah, people saw that I was different and I didn't fully have an explanation for it. I loved 50s music. I loved the 50s style. I also now understand I'm hyperlexic. And so I would get a stack of books. They found that I had a college reading level in about fourth grade and went to put me in talented and gifted. And I went, oh, no, 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 no. I've already been othered enough. You're not
yeah.
going to put me in that group. And I remember back then it was like they had me doing a bubble test. I remember like picking bubbles at random, going, no, 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 I've been figured out. And I would actually take apart microscopes because there was a light inside so I could stay up all night and read until my parents caught that. They had to take
Yeah.
away all the lights. I
So,
love learning, still love learning.
okay, but this is the thing in our society, in the school system, because that was the next question that I was going to ask. So, how did you
Hmm.
do in school? And when they're calling you auto whatever, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, well, it must mean that she struggled in school, but you didn't. It was actually the opposite. So, or you did in certain subjects?
Yes and no. So in math, especially with the dyslexia, I
Mm.
did. And confidence wise, I mean, RSD was strong with me. And then you add the abuse, my confidence was just thrashed. I did graduate a year early. I skipped my junior year because I didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't enjoy having to sit still. I do a lot of schooling now and a lot of it is remote. While I was cleaning, I've just recently had a shift out of cleaning to build some new businesses due to an arm injury. And I've been forced to move out of cleaning, which I love cleaning.
Which
I
that already sounds more on the autism spectrum than the ADHD spectrum, which I believe are all connected. But you know what I mean as
yeah,
far as and I'm like you. Like everybody thinks that, oh, if you have ADHD, it must mean that your surroundings are a mess. But
my
for many of
surroundings
us,
are a mess. Yes, they are.
okay, so
Mhm.
what's the deal with cleaning then? If your surroundings are a mess, but you love to clean, that is a disconnect all in itself.
That's another ADHD autism fight right there that I like to joke about.
So
So
are your surroundings a mess in that there's a lot of clutter, but you're very clean? Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
and I have 9 children, and I give myself empathy to go, it is not what is most important. I always say, you know what? I have a laundry couch, and I hope any listeners listening to this know that I support your laundry couch. The laundry is clean, it is unfolded, it might be wrinkly. Throw that ish in the dryer with a wet washcloth. Get your wrinkles out, ladies. I support your laundry couch. Some of it
I've
is
never
just
heard
having
of that.
compassion for yourself. I bet you there are so many listeners that are listening that will find that they have a pile of laundry somewhere.
That would drive me friggin' insane. We're all different, right? And
Right,
my way of managing my brain is you've got to remove all of the visual clutter.
right.
But I don't have 9 kids. That is the most ADHD thing I've ever heard. Did you ever think maybe I'm going to stop? Or is it like, no,
Well,
let's add another one?
you know, so we're a blended family. I came with
Mm.
5. Well, I have 5 total. See, here's another numbers thing, right? I've given birth to 5. 2 of them are his and mine, and he came
Uh-huh.
with 4. Okay.
Got it.
So,
Got
so
it.
5 of them I've given birth to. And interestingly enough, I used to do childcare for a church at a small
Mhm.
town I lived in with a girlfriend. We were in middle school and I was
Mm-mm.
watching all these children. I also had a brother 8 years younger than me, so I've been a mini mom most of my life. And I always said, I want to have at least 5 children. My youngest child is 6 months that I've given birth to biologically. So I did that. I gave birth to 5 kids. I have 4 others from my honey that we're raising together. And then I'm still involved with my husband's kids, my ex-husband. I call him my husband. And they're amazing, one of which is about to become a mom, and I get to be a bonus grandma. In nonviolent communication, this is Celebrate that I'm showing you.
Brianna is holding up her hands and she's flickering them. And what does that
Yeah,
mean?
celebration. And some like
Oh,
cheerleaders
okay.
will, they have a name for it. Jazz hands, it's very similar in translation. But for me, this means celebration. My life is so full with these kiddos, and it's hard. There's days it's really hard. I acknowledge that. And I'm happier than I've ever been. I've learned how to practice mindfulness with my money. I'm very frugal. We share one semi-reliable car. I cannot fit everyone in our vehicles. So sometimes we have to take 2 trips. Right now, we don't have a way to do long-term trips, but that will change. I'm working on building businesses where I'm hoping and will be seeing that we'll be able to do these things.
You really love kids.
I do. I do. And they really, if we look at our relationship with our children, they really can help us grow and face our stuff.
Okay. So wait, there were 2 things that I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
So Brianna, can you tell me what were you like as a kid? Like if I had observed you, what would I have seen?
Hmm. So, very creative. I played by myself a lot. I loved music. I loved art. I loved to read. I was a runner. My mom needed to leash me, and I would run from her. And I thought it was funny. I now apologize, Mom, if you listen to this. I see you. I love you. Um, I thought it was funny to hide in the stores and hide in the racks and watch her panic. I love sensory play. I loved water. I would run towards water, which terrified her. I started mediating at a pretty young age. I showed empathy for others at a young age before I knew what it was. I did love people, and I loved to read. I was, stuck in my own little world a lot with music, with books.
You
Yeah.
know, when you're telling me the story and just watching you, I think of a field, a big open wide
Mm,
field with sunflowers. So it's
mm.
not green grass. It's more kind of a hippie child and
Yeah,
just really
yeah.
loving and nature loving. And yeah, was that you?
Yeah. Well, and I joke, my mom doesn't like this joke if she's listening. I called my parents hippie leftovers. Okay. So
Uh,
my mom did drive a VW bus as much as she doesn't like this. One of their first dates was at Hot Springs. Okay, they were going to hot springs. So yes, and then we lived out in the country. And so we lived and really one of my classes only had 12 kids is how small
Mm.
it was. And then we lived 5 miles out of town, a mile and a half up a dirt road. So what you're seeing is absolutely accurate. There were several fields. I called them meadows that I went and played in. And at one of the houses, we grew most of our own veggies. We canned. There were sunflowers. Um, my ex stepdad was Buddhist. And so we did world religion studies on Sundays where we'd learn about all the different religions. There was Tai Chi, there was meditation. So,
Wow.
yes,
So, what has changed since you were diagnosed?
self acceptance is the biggest thing. Understanding alexithymia is a thing. To have the difficulty of putting your emotions into words and expressing them. I remember
Mhm.
when I read, although alexithymia is not a diagnosis, I remember when
Mhm.
I read online about it after I was diagnosed, I cried for 2 hours. It's not that I don't feel, I feel very deeply. It
Mhm.
was that I didn't know how to express it. And this
Mhm.
became a special interest. So, with that information, I learned, and I had to look at a lot of different tools, a lot of books, a lot of practices to be able to express and identify my emotions. And I go back every time to the compassionate communication. That's really what helped me understand and be able to express my emotions.
So, how did you find compassionate
Hmm.
communication? Can you tell us how that came about?
Yes. So my father knew the creator of nonviolent communication. His name was
Mm.
Marshall Rosenberg. He passed away in 2015. He grew up in Detroit during the riots, and he was a psychiatrist who looked at psychiatry and went, this ain't it. We need something different. And he created this nonviolent communication steps training. And he ended up not just training, government personnel, working in family systems with parents and raising children, but in countries at war, it's mediation is what it is. And so it's so multifaceted of how you can apply this practice to most everything. So my dad said, Brianna, you're a natural at this. You should learn this. You should get certified. This is something I would love to see you do. And I said, Dad knows nothing. I know everything. I want to do this and that and this and that. And I ignored my father. In 2018 to 2019, I went through my second divorce and I really hit rock bottom. In a lot of ways, it was really difficult. And I read Marshall Rosenberg's book titled Nonviolent Communication while I was cleaning. I still remember the house I was cleaning in where I listened to most of the book. I see that snapshot in my brain. I remember the bathroom tile I was scrubbing.
Wow.
It changed my life, and I found my brain does that in moments not just of trauma but of in positive moments
Yeah.
or perceived positive. We like to call them in nonviolent communication life serving. um,
Hmm.
and I listened to this book and I went, Dad was right. I resonated with his work so much. And that's when my process began of study and special interest. um, Keeping it in my ears, watching videos, signing up for global training. I've really just in love. I'm in love with the journey and the process I've had in learning it.
So, how you have 9 kids?
Mm.
How do you use this compassionate communication? That's your moniker, right? From the
Hmm.
nonviolent. Okay. Compassionate communication in working with your kids every single day.
Sure. The biggest concept, and I feel like this is hard, especially for a lot of us with RSD, is we're allowed to have needs. We have needs, all of us, every single one. Our kids, I do. And sometimes our strategy to meet those needs can be in conflict, right? My kid might want to go play and they want me to go play with them, and I have work to do right then. The needs are valid. I need my focus time. I need some clarity and to get my work done, and they just want to play. So the needs are both valid, but the strategy in that moment doesn't work, right? And it may be, I hear you're really excited. You have a need for play right now. I have a need for focus and to get this done. And then making a request. How about in an hour? You can have my full attention and we'll go outside and play. That would be an example of nonviolent communication or compassionate communication in work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can watch their face. They might be a little disappointed, and just acknowledging, giving them empathy, sitting right beside them, not telling them their feelings are wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right? Their feelings are totally valid. Are you? And asking it as a question to give them choice, to say, no, that's not what I'm feeling. I see you might be feeling a little disappointed right now, and giving them the opportunity to say, no, I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling sad, whatever that may be, and having that discussion for them to accept their feelings and just sitting beside them to get through it.
I think you were saying that there are 4 steps to this. Can you
Yes.
set out the 4 steps?
Absolutely. The first one is observation. So observation is very simple. It's what is happening right then in that moment. A lot of times we do an evaluation. We add the feelings to it. Oh, this person was so mad. It's none of that. I had a conversation with this person. They walked away and their steps were loud, right? It's not an evaluation of what they're feeling. We haven't communicated with them to know what they were feeling. It's just observing what the situation is, right? The next would be acknowledging our feelings. That one was a hard one for me to be able to identify what I was feeling in that situation.
So is it just acknowledging your feelings, or in the example, with one of your kids, is it also acknowledging their feelings?
It can be both, right?
Okay.
We want to make I statements when we're doing the communication portion. So it would be, I am feeling, right? Let's say this person, had loud steps and they walked away. Let's say that I'm going to use examples. Maybe that triggered something from my childhood. I felt that they were angry. So now I'm feeling scared. Okay. We'll walk through a situation. Let's say, what is my need in that situation? Step 3, I'm going to acknowledge what my need is. I need safety. Maybe I don't feel safe because of what's happened to me in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can make a request. If this person's already gone, right, it might be hard for me to make a request of them. So maybe I make a request of myself. I'm going, and this is what I specialize in, is self-empathy, right? So I'm going to give myself some empathy. I'm going to acknowledge that I have been through some hard things and this scared me. Maybe at this point, I'm going to bring in the mindfulness and do my favorite breathing technique that is science that will slow my heart rate and calm me down.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a way of giving myself empathy in that moment. And then you mentioned to the other person, maybe the other person walks back in and I say, so-and-so partner, I'm feeling scared right now. I need safety. Would you be willing to give me a hug right now? Just knowing that maybe what's going on has everything to do with me and nothing to do with them. And then they get to make a choice. Do I want to give you a hug right now? I was really mad, maybe, and I walked off. Or maybe it wasn't that they were mad. Maybe their feelings were just hurt and they wanted connection with me and then gave me a hug. This is just giving some real life examples of how it can work when we're pointing our ears in, to ourselves and then out to someone else.
So it really sounds like the whole tenet of this program and how you would work with the child or how you would work with the client is all about curiosity.
That's my favorite emotion. I'm so glad that you said that. I do have a favorite emotion. I feel like curiosity is an antidote to many situations. Especially with women, we have a lot of us statistically have a hard time with anger, right? Or what we would maybe call some other non-life serving emotions. Some people perceive them as negative. If we're angry or we're sad, to apply curiosity, I picture beakers, right? So let's say I'm feeling angry. I had a hard time accepting my own anger because of my past traumas as a child. I would see anger and I would shut down. That was a real life example for me I gave you. And I found that when I applied some drops of curiosity into my beaker and I could go, what happened to me that is creating this reaction today? What happened? And I would start to really look in the mirror, turn inward, and acknowledge why I was feeling that. Curiosity, I feel like is magical.
I think of that question, which I use all the time, which is that really true?
Mm,
Right? Kind of what you were
yeah.
saying that, we may infer certain emotions from other people that they're not there at all.
Yes, especially with RSD. The statistics with ADHD and RSD are so high. I have so much compassion, especially for every listener right now with RSD. I wish that I could just take some of your RSD and hold it for you so you didn't have to carry it. It's so heavy. It's so
Yeah.
heavy. It's shame for a lot of us. It's
Mhm.
guilt. And I feel like I've learned how to carry my RSD and to have empathy and compassion for myself and for those that struggle with it. I've even thought about adding something to my website where people can send an email or send an item that represents their RSD so I could hold it.
I'm curious. You mentioned that you really struggled with the anxiety, and it sounds like
Mm,
RSD. What
yes.
was the turning point for you? What did you do? Because clearly you already knew about this compassionate communication, right? You were
Sure.
raised in this. So, what was the switch? What happened that made you more compassionate to you?
It was a challenge, really. With the abuse that happened in my childhood, I continued to pick what was comfortable and
Mm,
what felt normal to me.
yeah.
And that is super common for women in general. And the statistics go up exponentially when there's neurodivergence involved. It got to the point where I remember the moment I was dating someone that was not healthy. And I have a teenage daughter that was cutting. And the moment of change, and I know this is some trauma to bring up, but this is the real answer to your
Yeah.
question. I saw the marks on her arms and I recognized
Mhm.
them from my childhood and what I went through. And in that moment, I thought, I've got to do better. I've got to do better for my kids. They're watching me. And if I cannot give myself compassion, how do I expect them to? And that became a special interest for mom to get well. Um,
Mhm.
and I started studying all kinds of topics, reading all kinds of books, learning about mindfulness. One of the, going to therapy, I was already in therapy. I hit therapy hard, like hitting the books as you're studying for a big exam. I reached out and got support. And I remember looking up confidence because I struggled with confidence and making a list. Here comes the autism, right? How
Yeah.
can I improve my confidence? And there's a line item in your book. I remember it as number 8, where you have to learn and do what works for you. I forget the chapter, but you give a list of different things. And I remember it was number 8. And to me, it's like you can try on strategies like you try on clothes. Oh, this isn't comfortable. This doesn't work for me. Yeah, I kind of like this. I'm going to wear it a few more times and see if it fits. Or like, yes, I love this. So trial and error. I tried a lot of things to see what worked. And my best fit was mindfulness. And I believe mindfulness is compassionate communication as well. That would be mindfulness thought work and how we work through things.
So, how is your daughter? Is she okay?
You know, I'm excited to say that she is starting her first business with us ADHDers, right? There's a high chance we're going to be an entrepreneur. So she loves freeze-dried candy. Within the last few weeks, she has attained a freeze-dried candy machine and is experimenting. She's had some struggles. She's been through some things, and I could not be more proud of the progress that she has made. She actually helped me set up this computer today or last night. She's one of the most empathetic individuals I have
Oh,
ever met. I am proud of all my children, all of them. And I'm very proud of her, and I know she's watching. She inspires me to stand up and do better. Just being on this podcast, I said a year ago or so, I want to be on this podcast. And I sent you two other women's names that I felt like had already made it, like, go interview them. I'm not ready yet. And she gets to see me on here now. Yeah.
that's wonderful. So I'm
Yeah.
curious about mindfulness and
Mm.
compassionate communication. Has your daughter adopted that, or is she starting to? Is she realizing that it actually does work?
Yes and no. With ADHD, we are all naturals at mindfulness. I think with ADHD, we're told to focus all the time, right? We are focusing. We're focusing
Mhm.
on what's around us. So she with ADHD is a natural at
Uh-huh.
mindfulness. She doesn't currently believe in all the theology, right? And all the practices, and that's okay. Some of that is because mom does, right? And she's a teenager and she's doing what teenagers are supposed to do. Yeah.
Exploring and figuring out what works for her.
Hmm. Yeah.
I get a
And
lot
she,
of pushback too on the
yeah.
mindfulness from my son, not so much my daughter, not
Mm,
from my daughter at all, actually. So you said something really interesting, and I read it somewhere, and I thought, that's a disconnect. But the way you just explained it was really interesting. How are ADHD and mindfulness actually natural partners? Because I think
mm.
most of us would think, that's something we kind of struggle with.
Well, and that's because the world has told us mindfulness is sitting and meditating. Most
Hmm.
people, when I say, what is mindfulness, they think of sitting cross legged, doing a sitting meditation. And the reality is, there are so many other types of meditative practices. My favorite, I call 911 breathing. And this has been in studies at Stanford and UCLA. I love science. And they've found that using this breathing technique, we can actually calm our nervous system. And just guess, Tracy, how many breaths do you know on this one?
Well, okay, so no, because what I have
Okay.
heard, because I struggle with all of that breathing stuff.
Yes.
And then what I read was all of it doesn't matter what strategy you use, all you need to make sure of is that the breaths are deep and not shallow.
Mm.
Because I can't
So
remember the numbers. So I'm curious
yeah,
what it is.
yeah. I think what they're talking about when they said when they're deep and not shallow is breathing with your diaphragm, right? So
Hmm.
you're not breathing up at the top of the chest. If you put
Yeah.
a hand at the top and you put a hand, in between the bottom of your ribs, you can and take some breaths, you can actually feel where you're breathing from. If you're breathing shallow up high or if you're breathing with your diaphragm. And breathing with your diaphragm is a really important component. This 911 breathing is what I call it. Actually can calm your nervous system in 3 breaths. There's some case studies going on that it may be actually able to replace a meditation practice. When I tour guide mindfulness or teach it, we do mindfulness walking, mindfulness eating. And if we're on a walk and we do this breathing technique within 3 breaths, you can just notice everyone's walking kind of slow. Some people call this grounding. And what's funny is if you have teenagers, a lot of times you will hear them sigh and think they're being
Yes.
rude, right? And we do it. Women get a bad rap for it. Oh, she's being emotional. Men do it too. They just aren't, you don't hear about it as much, right?
Right.
What is actually happening when we do that is we're trying to calm our nervous system.
Hmm.
So when your teen sighs at you, just remember before you're reactive at them for being, whatever word you think, disobedient, rude, whatever, they are
Yeah.
literally just trying to calm down And you can do this breathing technique is actually doing it manually. So if you take nothing else from this podcast, like I said, it's 911 breathing. This was the biggest way that I was able to calm and am no longer diagnosed with anxiety. And I'm going to walk us through it.
Okay.
So it's 2 breaths in through the nose if you can. Okay. The first breath in, you're going to breathe in close to full capacity, but not quite. Okay. So you're going to breathe in and then again. And then you're going to breathe out slower than you breathe in. And I'm trying to make it
Never
audible.
heard of that. I've never
And
heard of that
and that's
breathing
what makes
technique.
me so sad. I wish everyone knew this because just 3 breaths, I practice it 5 minutes a day, or in mindfulness if I see a bird. Okay. I love mindfulness, which meets people where they are. I'm like, oh, there's a bird. I see a bird, 3 breaths. Okay. So I'm practicing so that I remember when something traumatic or I'm really stressed, I remember my breathing. Practice, they
Okay.
say, makes perfect, right? We don't want to be
Do it
perfect, but
again.
we want to know. Yeah. I'm going to
Do
do
it again.
3 breaths and I'm going to try to make it audible. And then I'm going to explain the science behind it. Okay,
Okay.
so we're going to breathe in almost to full capacity. Another short breath in. Out slower than we breathe in. Now I'm going to do it without the words. One more. And just in the time I did that, I feel calmer. What that does is that double breath in inflates the sacs in your lungs. That's what happens when you're sighing and trying to regulate. And anytime you breathe out slower than you breathe in, you are slowing your heart rate.
I love that so much, Breanna,
Mm,
that I am going to adopt it for my blends. I do these
mm,
daily blends. It's, affirmations, meditation,
sure,
gratitude, it's a whole combination, which is why we call it blends. The whole point is to regulate the nervous system. But
sure.
I have this breathing part, and I have not been able to get comfortable with it.
And it's meeting people where they are. That's my belief with mindfulness. If you can add practices that are simple, especially, we're already doing so much. Just add them into things you're already doing. The first few bites when you eat, slow down. What do you smell? What do you taste? What are you hearing? What do you feel? What do you see? Being in that moment. I know you like tapping, so you can incorporate that into tapping, walking, taking a stroll. My favorite mindfulness activity is spending time with my children and watching them. It's a little weird if you smell them. I do it anyways. What do they smell like right now? Okay, you might need a shower,
Mountain
right?
Dew.
Just because the saying, this too shall pass, right? We use that a lot in perceived negative times, but remembering it in the perceived positive ones as well, right? Our kids grow up so fast. My oldest is 22.
They do. They
Yeah,
do.
and just paying attention to our senses in that moment, especially the happy ones,
Yeah. Yeah.
the ones that are filled with joy.
Yeah. What I love that you're doing is you're actually connecting mindfulness and using it in a way that actually will work so much better for our ADHD brains than what we typically
Yes.
think that, mindfulness is about, which is being still,
Yeah,
and sitting there for 10 minutes and paying attention to your breath, and then your thoughts are
sure.
all over, and,
Yeah.
versus this is a way
Excuse me.
because we can be physical at the
Hmm.
same time we're doing it, that we can actually practice mindfulness.
Yes, and not beat ourselves up. If our
Mm-mm.
thoughts wander, that's okay. That's okay. And we can bring it back to center if we want to, or maybe we need to listen to our body and get up and go do something else. That's all right too. We have many strategies to meet our own needs.
I mean, one of the things that I love is I love this idea of nature mindfulness. exactly. Like I love birds and especially hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are so ADHD, right? I mean,
Right?
there's so many things
They're
about
so
them.
fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're beautiful.
Um, so if I'm walking in the garden and I see a hummingbird, that is exactly when I'll practice
Mm,
mindfulness. But I didn't even know that that was mindfulness. I thought of it
yes,
more as gratitude, but they're connected, right?
they
Gratitude and
are.
mindfulness is the same thing.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I love gratitude practices. I actually thrift items. I have another business that I've started. It's called
Like a
Thankfully
ADHD.
Thrifted. This is
Uh-huh.
one of my clothing pieces. In the US, on average, we throw away about 82 pounds of clothing a year. Um, and so I handpick thrifted items, and then I have artwork added to them from local artists. Part of the proceeds go to what I call the Starving Artists Fund, because I don't believe any artist should be starving. And then the
Mm-hmm.
other part goes to combat domestic violence, both in my area. And I have a girlfriend that I met through the Center of Nonviolence. She's in Nigeria, and her story is just so amazing. We carried our last children together. She's one of my best friends, and I love her so much. And so some of that money is going, here locally, staying here in the US, and some is also going to Nigeria. I bring up the gratitude jars though, because I'm thrifting items to make gratitude jars as well. Right now, I have some antique ball canning jars that are super cute. And then I'm turning them into a gratitude jar. When things are physical and in front of us, we can then write. And I love gratitude in action. So, what am I thankful for? And then, what can I do to show my gratitude? Right? If I'm grateful for my kids, how can I show it? I can tell them, I'm thankful for you. Or I know your love language is acts of service. I'm grateful for you and I would love to do something for you today and show my gratitude and actually saying these things to them. They feel
So what's the
appreciation. Yeah.
absolutely. And then
Yeah.
exactly. So you're grateful for them. You are literally generating, you're feeling the positive emotion
Hmm.
and you're sending it off. And
Right.
it's a ripple effect, right? You're
It
sending it
is.
off to your daughter, who then sends it off to her friends, and then it just keeps going on.
Yes.
So tell me what a gratitude jar is. Is it you're literally writing what you're grateful for and sticking it in the jar?
Yeah, and I love doing it with sticky notes because then you can turn around and make an art piece with it. Um, I run a volunteer group as well,
Oh
and
my
at one
gosh,
of
how
our
many things do you
events,
do?
a lot. I mentioned that 20 tabs open and I'm working all of them.
Yes,
Um,
with 9 kids.
yeah, and I'm enjoying it though. I'm so happy to be doing it, and their needs are being met. My needs are being met. I don't do it perfectly, and I don't expect perfection from myself,
Yeah.
right? A lot of times we do, and I have to catch myself, being hard on myself, but that's where my compassionate communication comes in. And with the organization, I want to mention something else that it was just such a cool concept to me. We have what we call empathy buddies. So I have mine are all women, right? And we actually can set up what we call an empathy session where we practice nonviolent communication or compassionate communication together. They can be scheduled weekly. They can be, I have one gal, we do 911 sessions, right? Like something's
Mhm.
happening, something's up. I need to talk this through with you. And the person listens. And then last step would be offering advice, right? A lot of times they'll just reiterate what they heard, maybe do an empathy guess, which would be what are my feelings and needs, the steps 2 and 3. And then, the strategy would be the request. And a lot of times, we don't even need to do that. Sometimes we do. I have friends that are empathy buddies that strategy is fun for us. So we'll go, oh, you could do this, you could do that. Often we get set on one strategy as our solution, when oftentimes there are many strategies to get our needs met.
So, if someone is listening and they're thinking, I want an empathy buddy, where do they go for this?
So this is something that you can find on my website. And I want to list that you can also find many resources on CNVC's website as well, the global organization.
Okay. So what advice would you give to someone who's new to mindfulness? Maybe they're just hearing about this for the first time and they're looking to start.
Mm,
They want to put it into their daily routine, but they don't even know what to do. What would you recommend?
sure. I would recommend finding things that you do already. And it's considered habit stacking would be the technical name for it. Habit stack easy things that feel achievable to you. If a 30-minute sit down meditation practice doesn't feel achievable, like what you said, I'm building this in when I walk through the garden and I see a hummingbird, I'm going to do this 911 breathing.
Mhm.
Or I have to eat already. I'm going to take the first 1 to 2 bites of the food I'm eating and slow down. Do a couple of these breaths that I've learned, or any breathing practice, and notice my senses. Build it into things you're already doing that don't feel like work. And give yourself that compassion, that empathy when you miss it. You will do so much better and move so much faster when you're not beating yourself up, when you can be in love with that ADHD brain.
Absolutely. I
Mm,
love that. So, Brianna, what do you think the key to living successfully with ADHD is?
compassion. Compassion for ourselves. As someone who really has struggled with RSD, just
Did you
knowing that you're okay.
did you find, however, that part of what reduced the anxiety, made you feel less shame, stop beating yourself up, really started happening once you got diagnosed and you knew, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. I just have a different brain.
Absolutely, positively. And it, even after the diagnosis, I continued learning.
Mm.
I continued learning different pieces like the alexithymia, right? I learned more about RSD. So when I got my diagnosis, and then I'm a forever learner, enjoying learning more about that diagnosis. And there's still so much we don't know. I'm a lover of science and fully understanding that more information is going to come out later,
Yeah.
and being okay with exactly where I am right now and knowing more resources are going to come. And I'm going to enjoy finding them because that is play to me. That's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Brianna, where can people find you if they want to know more about you and what you do?
Yes. My website is thecenters.org. And the website's a little silly with my dyslexia. It's actually the English spelling, which is, I'll just spell it out, the centers, plural, centres.org is my website. And you can also find me on most socials with my first and last name, Breanna, Breanna. And I know I gave you work with my last name. It actually means self-learner is the translation. I joke I have to learn the hard way, right? And it's Autolitano. AUTO is Greek for self. And then LITANO, Autolitano.
Isn't that the best last name?
I love it. I changed it twice when I got married and I never wanted to, and I won't change it again. I love my last name. And my youngest son, my partner, actually, I really wanted one of my kids to have my last name, and my youngest son has it as well. So I'm excited about it.
Oh, it's
Hmm.
adorable. It's such it's so perfect for you, right?
Yes, yes.
And this love of learning and this curiosity. You're just like a bright little bushy-tailed squirrel.
Yes, squirrel. My oldest kiddo says when she was young, she goes, "Mom, you're like a crow." And I'm going, "What? What do you mean?" She goes, "You just love shiny things." And I was like, "So right. So right."
Ah, out of the mouth of babes.
Right?
Brianna, thank you so much for spending time with us here today. It was such a joy to get to know you.
Thank you, Tracy, for having me. It's been my pleasure.
So that's what I have for you for this week. If you like this episode with Breanna, please let us know by leaving a review. Our goal is to change the conversation around ADHD, helping as many women as we possibly can learn how their ADHD brains work so that they too may discover their amazing strengths. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you here next week.